He forced his pregnant wife to kneel in the rain all night. But what happened next will leave you breathless. Stay until the end, because the twist will shock you. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, soaking the quiet suburban street outside Houston, Texas. But in front of one particular house, the storm was nothing compared to the cruelty happening within its yard. A young woman, Emily Carter, her body frail and her hands trembling, knelt on the cold concrete of the driveway. Her belly, swollen with new life, made every breath heavy, every second more dangerous. Yet her husband, Michael Carter, stood at the doorway, arms crossed, his eyes hard as stone. "Stay there," he barked, his voice cold and merciless. "You won't get up until you've learned your place." Emily shivered, her soaked dress clinging to her skin, her hair plastered against her pale face. Tears mixed with the rain, streaming down her cheeks, but she made no sound. She had cried too many times before, and tonight she knew that crying wouldn't change a thing. The neighbors watched through parted curtains. Some shook their heads, horrified, but none dared to step forward. They had seen Michael's temper before. They had heard his shouting late at night, the slamming of doors, the sound of breaking glass. And now they saw the ultimate cruelty, a pregnant wife punished like a child, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. Inside the house, Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a sly smirk pulling at the corner of his lips. A message from his secret lover. While his wife suffered outside in the storm, he texted back sweet words to another woman, as though Emily were nothing more than an inconvenience. Emily lowered her head, her lips whispering prayers no one could hear. She wasn't praying for herself anymore. She was praying for the tiny heartbeat inside her, the child who had no voice, no choice, trapped in this nightmare with her. Her knees ached, pressed against the hard surface. Her arms wrapped protectively around her stomach, shielding her unborn baby from the cold as best she could. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The rain did not stop, and neither did Michael's cruelty. Lisa Johnson, Emily's best friend and a nurse at the local clinic, drove past after her late shift. Her headlights caught sight of Emily on the ground. She gasped, pulling her car over, but as she opened the door, Michael's glare stopped her. "Leave her," he growled. "This is between husband and wife." Lisa's fists clenched. Her heart ached, seeing her friend so broken, yet she knew confronting Michael alone was dangerous. She whispered through the rain, her voice trembling but full of determination. "Emily, hold on. You're stronger than he thinks. This isn't the end." Emily's eyes flickered with a faint spark of hope, but her body was too weak to respond. She closed her eyes, her breath shallow, as thunder roared above. And then, as lightning lit the night sky, something inside Emily shifted. A decision began to form, buried deep within her pain. A decision that would change everything. For on this night, while her husband believed he had broken her, Emily silently vowed that one day he would face the unthinkable. Before that stormy night, before the cruel punishment that left her body trembling in the rain, Emily Carter had been a very different woman. She was born in a small town in Oklahoma, raised by hard-working parents who taught her the values of kindness, sacrifice, and hope. Emily grew up modestly, never surrounded by wealth, but always surrounded by love. She was the kind of girl who smiled even when her own heart was heavy, the kind of daughter who carried groceries home for her mother without complaint, and the kind of friend who stayed up late listening to others' troubles, even when she had her own. Her dreams were never extravagant. She wanted a family, a safe home, and someone who would love her unconditionally. That simple dream was what made her fall so deeply in love with Michael Carter. He had been charming once, sweet words, gentle hands, and promises of forever. Emily, only 21 when they met, believed she had finally found the man who would protect her. He swept her off her feet with dinners, flowers, and laughter. She saw in him the future she had always longed for, a husband who would build a life with her, a father who would cherish their children. When they moved to Houston after their marriage, Emily's world changed. She left behind her parents, her childhood friends, and the comfort of familiarity. Michael insisted on starting fresh, away from everyone she knew. At first, she thought it was romantic that he wanted them to build a life together in a new place. But over time, she began to realize the truth. The isolation wasn't love, it was control. Michael's words grew sharper, his patience shorter. He criticized the way she dressed, the way she cooked, even the way she spoke. Emily, eager to please, tried harder and harder, believing his anger was her fault. She thought if she just loved him more, if she just became the perfect wife, he would go back to being the man she had fallen for. Her job as a secretary in a small law firm gave her a brief escape, but Michael controlled even that. He demanded to know when she left work, who she spoke with, and why she sometimes smiled when she got home. Jealousy consumed him, and Emily, gentle as she was, never fought back. She lowered her head, endured the shouting, and prayed that things would change once their baby was born. But deep inside, cracks began to form. Emily was not weak, even if the world saw her that way. She carried strength from her upbringing, strength she didn't even know she still possessed. It was buried under layers of fear and silence, but it was there, waiting. The night in the rain was not the first time Michael had broken her spirit, but it was the moment she realized something had to change. As her body shivered beneath the storm, Emily's mind went back to her parents' words. "You deserve respect, Emily. Never forget your worth." Those words echoed louder than Michael's insults. For the first time in years, she began to wonder if survival meant more than just enduring. Perhaps survival meant escape. And as her unborn child grew inside her, Emily knew she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for two lives. If Emily Carter was the symbol of quiet endurance, then Michael Carter was the embodiment of charm turned poison. To the outside world, Michael seemed like the kind of man many women dreamed of marrying. Tall, confident, with neatly combed dark hair and a sharp suit from his corporate management job, he projected the image of success. Colleagues admired his ambition. Neighbors thought he was respectable. And for years, Emily herself believed she was lucky to call him her husband. But beneath the polished exterior lay something far darker. Michael was a man who craved control, not love. He didn't just want a wife, he wanted possession. When Emily first met him, he played the role of the perfect gentleman. He listened to her stories, held her hand in public, and whispered promises of security. But once the wedding ring was on her finger, his true nature began to surface. The controlling habits started small. He told her which clothes looked appropriate, insisting he only wanted her to look her best. He corrected the way she spoke, claiming he was helping her sound smarter. At first, Emily mistook it for care, but soon the corrections became criticisms and the suggestions became demands. Michael thrived on appearances. To his coworkers, he was a dedicated husband, often bringing Emily to office parties with a protective arm around her waist. To neighbors, he spoke proudly of his wife's cooking, as though she were the perfect homemaker. But behind closed doors, his pride turned into disdain. A burned dinner, a misplaced document, even a slight hesitation in answering his questions could spark his temper. His anger was not always loud. Sometimes it was a chilling silence, a stare that pierced Emily's spirit. Other times it erupted into shouting that shook the walls. He rarely raised his hand, but the weight of his words was enough to leave wounds no one could see. When Emily became pregnant, Michael's attitude grew colder. He did not celebrate the news. Instead, he treated the baby as an inconvenience, something that would distract Emily from her duties as his wife. He began coming home later, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers, making excuses about work meetings and late deadlines. Emily knew deep down there was another woman. Michael believed he was untouchable. His charm fooled others, and his control over Emily made him feel powerful. He thought her silence was weakness. He thought her obedience meant he had broken her completely. But what Michael never understood was that true power does not come from fear. It comes from love. And while his cruelty grew, Emily's quiet strength waited, gathering like a storm beneath the surface. For now, though, Michael stood unchallenged in his kingdom. He walked through life with arrogance, dismissing his wife's tears as exaggeration, treating her sacrifices as meaningless. To him, Emily was not a partner. She was property. And yet, the irony was cruel. Michael believed he had everything under control, but his very arrogance was planting the seeds of his downfall. Because while Michael thought he was destroying his wife, he was unknowingly creating the woman who would one day bring him to his knees. Marriage was supposed to be a safe haven, a place where love grew stronger with time. But for Emily and Michael Carter, Their home in Houston became a battlefield disguised as a house. The walls that once echoed with laughter now absorbed silence, arguments, and the sound of slammed doors. At first, Emily tried to hold on to hope. She told herself that stress at Michael's job explained his temper, that maybe once the baby came, things would get better. She cooked his favorite meals, kept the house spotless, and forced smiles whenever he looked at her. But nothing was enough. The more she gave, the more he demanded, and the more he demanded, the more he despised her for not meeting impossible standards. Michael's cruelty didn't always come in shouts. Sometimes it was a cutting remark during dinner, like, "No wonder you never got promoted. You're too slow." Other times it was a dismissive wave of his hand when she tried to share her feelings. He treated her pregnancy as if it were an inconvenience, joking to his friends that she was getting too big to be attractive. Emily would sit in the bedroom afterward, one hand on her belly, whispering apologies to the child inside her, as though she had failed even before becoming a mother. The nights grew colder. Michael started staying out late, his excuses piling up like lies no longer hidden. Emily smelled perfume on his clothes, noticed lipstick stains on his collar, and felt her stomach twist in knots. She wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but fear always stopped her. Fear of his rage, fear of what he might do if she dared to speak. Neighbors began to notice. They saw Emily walking slower, carrying groceries alone, while Michael laughed with someone else on the phone. They heard muffled arguments through the thin walls and whispered among themselves. But no one stepped forward. People feared getting involved. In their eyes, Emily was just another wife trapped in a troubled marriage. One night, the mask slipped completely. Michael, half drunk from an evening out, stormed into the house. He accused Emily of embarrassing him at a work function earlier, even though she hadn't attended. His words were sharp, cruel, and irrational. Emily stood silently, holding her stomach, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, "Michael, please, I'm carrying your child." His response was chilling. "That baby doesn't matter to me. You don't matter to me. The only thing that matters is that you do what I say." In that moment, Emily felt something inside her break. Not her love, because love had already withered, but the illusion she had clung to for so long, the illusion that this marriage could still be saved. Still, she stayed. Not because she loved him anymore, but because fear held her hostage, and because she didn't yet see a way out. Every day became survival. Every night became a prayer that tomorrow might be different, but tomorrow never changed. Tomorrow only brought more cruelty, more humiliation, more silence. And as the marriage rotted from within, Emily began to realize that the man she had once trusted with her heart was not just unkind. He was dangerous. The night that changed everything began with a storm rolling across Houston. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, lightning split the heavens, and thunder shook the earth. For most families, it was a night to gather indoors, to share warmth while the rain battered against the windows. But for Emily Carter, it became the cruelest night of her life. Michael came home later than usual, the smell of alcohol thick on his breath. His shirt was untucked, and Emily noticed a faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers. She stood at the kitchen counter, preparing tea, her hands trembling. She had hoped tonight would be calm. She was tired, her body heavy with pregnancy, and her spirit drained from weeks of tension. "Where were you?" she asked softly, her voice careful, almost pleading. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Don't start," he snapped, tossing his keys onto the table. "I don't need to answer to you." Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She wanted to stay silent, to avoid the storm she saw brewing in his eyes, but something inside her cracked. For the first time in months, she dared to ask the question that haunted her. "Is there someone else?" The room went still. Michael's face twisted into fury, his jaw tightening as his fists clenched. "How dare you?" he roared, slamming his hand against the counter. "You think you can accuse me? You think you have the right?" Emily flinched, her hands instinctively moving to protect her stomach. "Michael, please, I just need the truth." "The truth?" His laughter was sharp, cruel. "The truth is you're ungrateful. I give you everything, and this is how you repay me? Fine. If you want to question me, then you'll learn what happens when you forget your place." Before she could react, Michael dragged her to the front door, ignoring her pleas. The The storm raged outside, rain slashing sideways in the wind. He shoved her onto the cold concrete of the driveway. "Kneel," he commanded. "Michael, please, I'm pregnant," she begged, her voice breaking. "Kneel," he shouted again, his face twisted with rage. Her knees hit the ground, sharp pain shooting through her body. The rain drenched her instantly, her dress clinging to her skin. The wind howled, lightning illuminated her pale face, and thunder echoed like a cruel drumbeat. Inside, neighbors peered through blinds, their whispers mixing with the storm. Lisa Johnson, driving home late from work, slowed her car when she saw Emily kneeling in the downpour. Her heart clenched, but Michael's glare from the doorway froze her in place. "Leave her," he snarled when Lisa cracked her window. "This is between us." Tears blurred Emily's vision, but she did not move. She hugged her stomach, whispering to her unborn child, promising protection even as her own strength faded. Hours passed. Midnight came. Michael never called her inside. By the time the storm reached its peak, Emily's lips were blue, her body trembling uncontrollably. She closed her eyes, feeling her strength slip away. And in that freezing rain, Emily realized that her husband's cruelty would never end, unless she found a way to end it herself. The morning after the storm, the neighborhood looked washed clean. Trees dripped with leftover rain, the streets glistened in the sunlight, and birds cautiously returned to the sky. But inside the Carter house, nothing was clean. Nothing was healed. Emily lay curled on the edge of the bed, her clothes damp, her body trembling from fever. Her hair stuck to her forehead, and her lips were pale. Every breath was shallow, every movement heavy. Michael, as if nothing had happened, whistled in the kitchen while making coffee. He glanced at her briefly before muttering, "You brought this on yourself. Maybe now you'll learn." His words cut deeper than the rain ever could. Emily didn't answer. Her voice had been stolen by exhaustion, by fear, by the weight of humiliation that pressed on her chest like a stone. She touched her stomach gently, relief flooding her when she felt the faint kick of life within. Her baby was still holding on. That thought was the only thing that kept her from breaking completely. The silence in the house was suffocating. Michael scrolled through his phone, smiling faintly at texts Emily knew weren't from work. He left for the day without a word, leaving Emily alone with her fragile body and her endless thoughts. Hours passed in stillness. Emily tried to sit up, but pain shot through her legs, raw from kneeling all night. She limped to the bathroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. What stared back was not the woman she used to know. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes swollen, her spirit almost invisible. She barely recognized the girl who once dreamed of love and safety. She pressed her palm to the glass, whispering softly, "You have to survive. For the baby. For us." But surviving meant silence. If she cried, Michael would call her weak. If she resisted, he would punish her again. So Emily carried her suffering quietly, hiding her bruises beneath long sleeves, covering her pain with fragile smiles when neighbors asked how she was. Lisa, her only friend, noticed the truth. She came by that evening with groceries, pretending it was just a casual visit. When Michael left the room, Lisa gripped Emily's hands tightly. "You can't keep living like this," she whispered. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "I have nowhere to go, no money, and I'm pregnant. What choice do I have?" Lisa's heart ached, but she saw a spark in Emily's eyes that hadn't been there before. A quiet strength buried under the suffering, waiting to rise. That night, Emily lay awake, listening to the sound of Michael's steady breathing beside her. She stared at the ceiling, her hand resting on her belly, her mind racing. The punishment had broken something, yes, but it had also awakened something new. She could not continue like this. She would not allow her child to grow up in fear. And in the silence of that long night, Emily made her first unspoken vow. One day, she would find a way out, no matter the cost. Lisa Johnson had known Emily since their college days. They had met in a study group, two shy girls who bonded over late-night coffee and dreams of the future. Lisa had always admired Emily's gentle heart, but she also knew that gentleness made her vulnerable. When Emily married Michael and moved to Houston, Lisa worried but hoped for the best. Over time, though, her worries grew into alarm. The night she saw Emily kneeling in the storm had shaken her to the core. No matter how much she replayed the scene in her mind, she couldn't erase the image of her friend's pale face and swollen belly under the pouring rain. Lisa had barely slept since then. Something had to be done. The following weekend, she stopped by the Carter house again. Emily opened the door slowly, her smile weak, her body leaning on the frame for support. Lisa carried a basket of fruit and soup she had made, pretending it was just a friendly visit. But the moment she stepped inside and saw the fading bruises on Emily's knees, her chest tightened with rage. "Emily," Lisa whispered when Michael went upstairs, "you can't go on like this. He's destroying you." Emily lowered her gaze. "Lisa, please, don't make it harder. If I upset him again, he'll what?" Lisa interrupted sharply, her voice breaking. "You're pregnant, Em. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about your child. You think he's going to treat a baby any better than he treats you?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She wanted to argue, but Lisa's words cut through her silence like lightning. She had thought the same thing countless times, but had been too afraid to say it out loud. That night, after Michael left for one of his work meetings, Lisa stayed behind. She sat across from Emily at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. "You have me," Lisa said softly. "You're not alone. I'll help you. Whatever it takes." Emily's lips trembled. "But I have no money, no plan. I can't just walk out the door." Lisa leaned forward. "Then we'll make a plan. I'll talk to people I know at the clinic. I'll help you see a lawyer. You don't have to do this overnight, but you can do it. Promise me you'll think about it." For the first time in months, Emily felt something stir inside her. Hope. It was fragile, like a flickering candle in the wind, but it was there. She nodded slowly, her tears spilling down her cheeks. Lisa reached across the table and took her friend's hand. "You're stronger than you think, and when the time comes, you won't face him alone." Later that evening, Emily lay in bed beside Michael, who was too distracted by his phone to notice the faint smile playing on her lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of courage, because now, Emily wasn't just suffering in silence. She had an ally, and together they would begin to imagine a life beyond Michael's control. For weeks after the storm, Emily carried the scars of that night on her body, in her heart, and in her memory. Yet one evening, when she least expected it, Michael returned home acting like a different man. He walked in with flowers, something he hadn't done since their early days of dating. He kissed her cheek gently and placed the bouquet on the counter as if it were an ordinary gesture of affection. Emily froze, confused, her hands tightening around the dish towel she was holding. "What's this?" she asked cautiously. Michael smiled, a practiced, charming smile. "It's for you, Em. I've been too hard on you. You don't deserve that. You're carrying my child, and I should be better." His words were like warm honey, but they tasted bitter to Emily. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to think the man she had once loved was still there somewhere. For a moment, she even allowed herself to hope. Maybe Lisa was wrong. Maybe he could change. Over the next few days, Michael kept up the act. He helped around the house, asked about her health, even cooked dinner one night. To outsiders, he looked like the picture of a devoted husband preparing to become a father. Neighbors commented on how lucky Emily was to have a man who finally seemed to grow up. But beneath the surface, cracks were obvious. Emily noticed the way his phone never left his side, how he slipped into another room when calls came in. She noticed the faint traces of cologne that weren't his, and the hollow look in his eyes when he said he loved her. One evening, as they ate together, Michael reached across the table and touched her hand. "I want us to start fresh, Emily, a new chapter. Don't you think we deserve that?" Emily forced a small smile, but her stomach churned. She remembered Lisa's warning. Abusers don't change, they just get better at pretending. Still, Emily played along. She nodded, pretending to accept his words. Inside, she was watching carefully, waiting, learning. If Michael thought his charm would make her forget the rain, the humiliation, the cruelty, he was wrong. The performance didn't last long. Within days, the mask began to slip. One night, when Emily mentioned that Lisa had invited her for a doctor's appointment, Michael's expression darkened. "Why do you need her? You have me," he snapped. Emily's heart sank. There it was, the control, the possessiveness, the old Michael breaking through. She realized then that his kindness was nothing more than a cover, a way to buy time while he continued his affair and kept her trapped. That night, Emily whispered to her unborn child, "We can't trust him. We can't wait for him to change." The flowers on the counter had already begun to wilt, their petals drooping and falling one by one. They were the perfect reflection of Michael's false promises. Beautiful for a moment, but dead at the root. And as Emily watched those petals scatter, she knew it was time to prepare for something bigger. A plan that would set her free. The night the last petal from Michael's bouquet dropped to the kitchen floor, Emily made her choice. She could no longer live in the shadows of fear, humiliation, and broken promises. For too long she had endured, praying for change that would never come. But now, with her child's future pressing against her ribs with every kick, she knew survival meant something more than waiting. It meant leaving. Lisa was the first person she confided in. They sat in Lisa's car one evening after Emily's doctor's appointment, the windows fogging from their whispered conversation. Emily's voice shook as she spoke. "I can't do this anymore, Lisa. If I stay, I'll lose myself completely, and I won't let my baby grow up in a house filled with fear." Lisa gripped her hand tightly. "Then we'll get you out, whatever it takes." But escaping Michael wasn't simple. He controlled the bank accounts, monitored her phone, and had eyes on her every move. If she vanished too suddenly, he would hunt her down. Emily needed a plan so flawless, he would never question it. That's when the idea came. A dangerous, desperate idea that only a woman pushed to the edge could imagine. "I'll disappear," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with determination. "I'll make him believe I'm gone forever. If he thinks I'm dead, he'll stop looking." Lisa gasped, but as the idea sank in, it began to make sense. Only in death could Emily truly be free in Michael's mind. It was a plan filled with risk, but it was the only way to break free from his control. Over the following weeks, Emily and Lisa began to prepare in secret. Lisa connected Emily with Daniel Miller, a lawyer who had seen too many women suffer in silence. Daniel listened carefully, his expression grave but supportive. "If this is what you truly want, we'll protect you. We'll set everything in place, documents, safe housing, even new identification if necessary. But you must be ready. Once you do this, there's no going back." Emily nodded, her hand resting on her belly. "I'm ready. For my child, I have to be." Together they staged small steps. Lisa smuggled clothes and essentials out of the Carter house during her visits. Daniel began drafting legal strategies in case Michael tried to seize control of Emily's assets. Emily herself wrote letters, farewells to her child, to Lisa, even to her parents back home, careful to hide them where Michael might one day find them. Each night, as Michael slept beside her, Emily lay awake rehearsing her escape in her mind. Her heart raced with fear but also with a strange, newfound strength. For the first time in years, she was no longer only reacting to Michael's cruelty. She was planning something of her own. And when the day finally came, she would vanish like a ghost in the storm, leaving Michael to believe he had destroyed her, when in truth, she had outwitted him. Because Emily wasn't planning to be his victim anymore. She was planning to become his greatest regret. The night Emily chose to vanish looked eerily similar to the one when Michael had forced her to kneel in the storm. Heavy rain hammered the streets of Houston, and the wind rattled the windows like a warning from fate itself. But this time, Emily wasn't the helpless woman kneeling in the cold. This time, she was the architect of her own escape. She had prepared carefully. Lisa parked her car a few blocks away, waiting in the shadows with the engine running. Daniel had already arranged the legal safety net and a temporary shelter where Emily could stay hidden. All that was left was for Emily to take the most dangerous step of all, slipping away without raising Michael's suspicion. That evening, Michael came home drunk again, his tie loose, his smile smug. He barely noticed Emily, who sat quietly at the table. To him, she was just a shadow now, someone too beaten down to matter. And that arrogance was exactly what Emily was counting on. When he staggered upstairs to shower, Emily moved quickly. She placed a small note on the counter, its words carefully chosen to sound like despair, not escape. "I can't do this anymore. Forgive me." Next to it, she left her wedding ring, a symbol Michael would take as final. She pulled on a hooded coat Lisa had given her and tucked a small bag under her arm. Every sound felt magnified, The creak of the floorboards, the rush of water upstairs, the pounding of her own heart. For a moment she froze at the front door, paralyzed by fear. What if he caught her? What if this failed? But then she placed her hand on her belly, feeling a faint kick, a reminder of why she had to do this. Her child deserved more than fear. With a deep breath, Emily opened the door and stepped into the rain. The storm swallowed her instantly, drenching her clothes, masking her movements. She hurried down the street, her eyes fixed on Lisa's waiting headlights. Behind her, the house loomed dark and oppressive, a prison she was leaving for the last time. Lisa flung the car door open, tears already streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered as Emily slid into the seat. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. The weight of the moment pressed on her chest, but beneath it was relief. Sweet, fragile relief. Back at the house, Michael finished his shower, humming to himself. He noticed the note and the ring lying on the counter. At first, he scoffed. "Pathetic," he muttered, assuming Emily had gone to Lisa's for the night. But as the hours passed and she didn't return, irritation turned into suspicion, and suspicion into panic. He stormed through the house, shouting her name, but only silence answered. Rain battered against the windows, echoing the emptiness around him. By dawn, when Emily still hadn't returned, Michael's hands shook as he clutched the note again. The words blurred, but the message was clear. His wife was gone. And for the first time in years, Michael Carter felt something he had never expected. Fear. At first, Michael dismissed the note as a tantrum. He told himself Emily was being dramatic, that she had probably gone to Lisa's house to cool off. He poured himself a drink, confident she'd crawl back the next morning with apologies. But when dawn came and Emily's side of the bed was still cold, something inside him shifted. Michael stalked through the house, muttering curses under his breath. "Where the hell are you, Emily?" His voice echoed in the empty rooms, bouncing off walls that suddenly felt too silent. He checked the garage. Her old car was still there. Checked her closet. Most of her clothes were gone. A cold shiver ran down his spine. By mid-morning, irritation turned into panic. He called her phone again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. He drove by Lisa's apartment, pounding on the door, but Lisa didn't answer. Neighbors peered out their windows as Michael shouted in the hallway, his composure slipping. The fear of losing control gnawed at him. For years, Emily had been predictable. She obeyed, she submitted, she stayed quiet. She was his possession. But now, she had slipped through his fingers like sand, leaving only a ring and a note that read like a final goodbye. That evening, Michael went to the police. He didn't admit the truth, of course. He told them his pregnant wife was missing, that he feared something terrible had happened to her. His voice shook with rehearsed sorrow, his eyes glassy with fake tears. The officers nodded politely, filing the report, unaware of the cruelty that had driven Emily away. As days passed with no sign of Emily, Michael's mask began to crack. He didn't sleep, pacing the house at night like a caged animal. He snapped at coworkers, his charm replaced with agitation. His mistress grew impatient with his distracted state, finally snapping at him. "If you miss her that much, why don't you just go find her?" The words stung deeper than she intended. Michael didn't miss Emily out of love. He missed the control, the power, the certainty. Without her, he felt naked, exposed, weak. Then came the moment that tipped his panic into despair. A search team discovered Emily's coat near a swollen riverbank outside the city. Torn, muddy, and waterlogged, it looked as though it had been there for days. The police delivered the news to Michael with solemn faces. "We can't confirm anything yet," one officer said carefully, "but it's possible your wife may have drowned during the storm." Michael's heart plummeted. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. He clutched the coat, rain-soaked fabric still clinging to the faint scent of her perfume. The idea that she was gone, truly gone, struck him with a force he hadn't expected. He stumbled back into the house that night, gripping the coat like it was all he had left. For the first time in his life, Michael Carter sat in silence. No rage, no arrogance, only emptiness. Because whether by fate or by choice, his wife had vanished from his world. And the thought of her death became the first ghost to haunt him. The small church in Houston was filled with hushed whispers, the air heavy with sorrow and speculation. A simple framed photo of Emily sat at the front, surrounded by white lilies and flickering candles. but there was no casket, no body. Only the haunting emptiness of a woman who had vanished into the storm, leaving behind questions no one could answer. Michael sat in the front pew, his head bowed, hands clenched tightly together. To anyone watching, he looked like a grieving husband, broken by tragedy. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief, his shoulders shaking with what appeared to be sobs. Neighbors, unaware of the truth, murmured sympathetically. Poor man. To lose his wife and unborn child like that? Lisa sat on the opposite side, her face pale, her eyes wet with real tears. She was the only one in the room who knew the truth, that Emily was alive, hidden, and watching her own funeral unfold from a distance. Lisa carried the weight of that secret like a stone in her chest, but she also carried pride. Her best friend had done the unthinkable. She had taken her life back, even if the world believed it was over. The pastor spoke gently, painting a picture of Emily as a devoted wife and expectant mother whose life had been tragically cut short. Michael bowed his head lower, playing his part perfectly. He sniffled at all the right moments, squeezed his eyes shut as if overwhelmed, and even whispered, "I'm sorry," under his breath, though no one could know what he was truly sorry for. After the service, people approached Michael, offering condolences. "She was such a sweet woman," one elderly neighbor said, patting his arm. Michael nodded, his lips pressed tight, wearing grief like a mask. Deep inside, though, a storm brewed. Was Emily really gone? Had the river swallowed her? Or had she found a way to escape him? The thought gnawed at him like an infection he couldn't cure. Meanwhile, far from the church, Emily sat in a small, rented apartment Lisa had secured through Daniel. She wore a plain sweater, her hair tucked under a scarf, her body trembling as she watched the service through a live stream Lisa secretly set up for her. Seeing her own photo framed in flowers, hearing her name spoken in past tense, it was surreal, chilling, and liberating all at once. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered to her unborn child, "This is the price of freedom. The world thinks we're gone, but we're still here, and one day he will know what he lost." Back at the church, Michael's mistress stood at the back, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. To her, the funeral wasn't about loss, it was about opportunity. With Emily out of the way, she believed her path to Michael was clear. She didn't yet realize that his foundation was crumbling, that the ghost of Emily Carter would haunt him in ways neither of them could predict. And as the candles burned lower, the world mourned a woman who wasn't dead, while her husband began to unravel in the chains of his own guilt. For a brief moment after the funeral, Michael Carter played the role of the grieving widower flawlessly. He walked around with red eyes, accepted casseroles from neighbors, and spoke softly about how much he missed Emily. But the act didn't last long. Once the condolences stopped and the neighbors returned to their lives, Michael began to reveal his true colors. The very night after the service, his mistress, Claire, walked boldly into the Carter house, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like a victory march. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "She's gone now. We don't have to hide anymore." Michael smirked, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Finally," he said. "No more nagging, no more drama, just us." They toasted to Emily's absence, laughing as though her memory were nothing more than an inconvenience swept aside. Michael didn't care that her photo still sat on the mantel, framed in black ribbon. He didn't care that the neighborhood still whispered in pity. He was free, or so he thought. His arrogance grew quickly. Within days, he started parading Claire around town, introducing her as a close friend. He brought her to dinners, posted pictures of them online, and even took her to the very restaurant where he had once proposed to Emily. When people raised their eyebrows, Michael brushed them off. "Life goes on," he told them coldly. "I can't live in the past." Behind closed doors, though, cracks were already forming. Claire wasn't the sweet escape he had imagined. She was demanding, jealous, and quick to remind him that she had given up her own reputation to be with him. "Don't you dare forget what I sacrificed," she hissed one night when he came home late. Michael, used to controlling Emily with ease, found himself irritated by Claire's boldness. But he swallowed his anger, for now. He needed her. She made him feel wanted, admired, and powerful. That illusion was all he had left. Meanwhile, the guilt he tried to bury began to surface in unexpected ways. He found himself staring at Emily's coat, still tucked away in a drawer. Some nights he swore he could hear her voice in the empty house, whispering his name in the dark. Once, while shaving, he caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror behind him, only to spin around and find nothing there. Michael laughed it off during the day, blaming the whiskey or his lack of sleep. But in the quiet hours when the world was silent, the ghost of Emily Carter haunted him. Still, his arrogance pushed him forward. He began making plans with Claire, selling the house, investing Emily's savings, starting fresh somewhere new. He signed papers with a smirk, convinced he had outsmarted everyone, even fate itself. What Michael didn't know was that Emily was alive, watching, waiting. Every arrogant move he made, every selfish laugh he shared with Claire, was another nail in the coffin of his own downfall. Because while Michael celebrated his freedom, he had no idea that the woman he thought was buried by the storm would one day return, not as his wife, but as his reckoning. While Michael strutted around town with Claire on his arm, Emily Carter was learning how to breathe again. Hidden away in a small apartment Daniel had secured under a different name, she lived in shadows, but for the first time in years, she felt safe. The apartment was modest, 2 rooms, a creaky bed, a second-hand couch, but to Emily it was a palace of freedom. She could close the door without fear of it slamming back in her face. She could walk across the floor without the weight of footsteps following her. And most importantly, she could place a hand on her belly and whisper promises to her unborn child without anyone mocking her for it. Lisa visited often, bringing groceries and prenatal vitamins. She'd arrive with bags of fresh fruit and warm soup, fussing over Emily like a protective sister. "You need strength," Lisa insisted, setting the food on the counter. "Not just for you, but for the baby." Emily would smile faintly, her eyes often filling with tears. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Lisa squeezed her hand. "You'll never have to find out." At night, when the world outside was quiet, Emily wrote in a small journal Daniel had given her. She wrote letters to her unborn child, letters filled with dreams of playgrounds, bedtime stories, and a life free from fear. She wrote confessions of the pain she had endured, not to dwell on it, but to release it. The journal became her therapy, her proof that she still existed, still had a voice. Daniel checked in weekly, updating her on Michael's behavior. "He's reckless," Daniel reported one afternoon, adjusting his glasses as he flipped through papers. "Spending money like water, showing off with his mistress. But don't worry, we're building a case. Every move he makes now is another weapon for us later." Emily listened, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and bitterness. She wanted justice, yes, but more than that, she wanted peace. Still, Daniel's reassurance gave her confidence. For the first time, she wasn't just running, she was preparing. Yet hiding wasn't easy. Every time she stepped outside, Emily wore a scarf and oversized sunglasses, terrified of being recognized. She avoided crowded places, spoke little to strangers, and lived with the constant ache of separation. Watching her own funeral online had been surreal, but living as though she were already dead was even harder. One evening, Lisa found her sitting by the window, staring out at the rain. "Do you ever regret it?" Lisa asked gently. Emily shook her head slowly. "No, I regret waiting so long. I regret letting him break me piece by piece. But leaving, faking my death, it's the only way I could save us." She placed her hand over her stomach, her voice steady. "And when this baby is born, I'll finally give them the life they deserve." Lisa's eyes shone with pride. "Then we'll be ready, Em. When the time comes, we'll show the world who you really are." And in that tiny apartment, Emily realized she was no longer just hiding. She was gathering strength for the day she would rise again. Emily had grown used to Daniel's weekly visits, the quiet conversations that gave her strength, and the careful updates about Michael's behavior. Most of the time, his reports only confirmed what she already suspected. Michael was reckless, arrogant, and unfaithful. But one afternoon, Daniel arrived with papers that made Emily's blood run cold. He laid a folder on the kitchen table, his voice low and serious. "Emily, there's something you need to see." Her hands trembled as she opened the file. Bank statements, signatures, legal documents. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then the truth slammed into her like a tidal wave. Michael had been preparing to strip her of everything, her savings, her name, even her child. Daniel explained, his voice steady but filled with anger. "These aren't just financial records. He filed documents to claim sole control of your assets, and there's worse. He started proceedings to question the paternity of your baby. If you were still with him, he would have tried to take the child from you the moment it was born." Emily's breath caught. "Take my baby?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel nodded grimly. "Men like him don't stop at control. They destroy, and he was planning it long before you disappeared." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She had endured the humiliation, the violence, the silence, but this betrayal pierced her deeper than any cruelty before. It wasn't enough for Michael to break her spirit. He wanted to erase her completely, to take the only pure thing she had left, her child. Lisa, who had come by to sit with her, slammed her fist against the table. "That monster. He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. We can't just let him keep living like nothing happened." Emily's hands shook as she clutched her belly. The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her of the life she was fighting for. Her tears hardened into something else: resolve. "He thought I was weak. He thought he could control me forever. But he's wrong. I won't let him win. Not now. Not ever." From that moment, Emily's plan shifted. She wasn't just escaping anymore. She was gathering evidence, preparing for a day when she could confront him not as the broken wife he remembered, but as a woman who had risen stronger from the ashes. Daniel leaned forward. "If you want justice, Emily, we'll need to be patient. We'll need proof. He's arrogant, but he's clever. He thinks you're gone, which makes him careless. That's our advantage. Every lie, every signature, every betrayal, we'll turn them all against him." Emily wiped her tears, her eyes blazing with a determination she hadn't felt in years. "Then let's begin." That night, as rain tapped gently against the apartment window, Emily opened her journal again. But this time, she didn't write letters of sorrow. She wrote a declaration. "For my child, for myself, for every woman who's ever been silenced, I will rise." And as the ink dried, Emily knew the truth was no longer a burden, it was her weapon. The weeks that followed tested Emily in ways she had never imagined. The stress of hiding, the constant fear of being discovered, and the weight of carrying her child in solitude began to take a toll on her fragile body. Some mornings, she could barely get out of bed. Her legs still ached from the night Michael had forced her to kneel in the storm, and her energy drained faster than she could replenish it. Lisa often found her curled on the couch, pale and sweating, her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "You need a hospital," Lisa pleaded one afternoon, kneeling beside her. Emily shook her head weakly. "No, if Michael gets even a hint that I'm alive, he'll find me. I can't risk it." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "You can't fight this battle if you're not well, Em." Emily smiled faintly, her lips cracked but her spirit intact. "I don't need to be strong in body. I just need to be strong in will. For my baby. For justice." Daniel brought medicine and arranged for a discreet doctor to check on her in the apartment. The physician confirmed what Emily already knew. She was exhausted, dangerously so, but the baby was still healthy. That single reassurance fueled her determination. At night, Emily battled fevers and nightmares. In her dreams, Michael's voice thundered through the walls, accusing her, mocking her, reaching for the child inside her. She would jolt awake, gasping for air, only to find herself safe in the small apartment. She would place her hand on her stomach, whispering through trembling lips, "We're still here. We'll make it." Her journal became her anchor. She wrote every day, sometimes just a few words, sometimes entire pages. Words of pain, words of defiance, words that painted a future where her child would run free in a world untainted by fear. Lisa often read by her side, tears streaming as Emily's handwriting grew weaker but fiercer. "You're leaving a legacy," Lisa said once. "One day, your child will know you never gave up." Emily's health may have faltered, but her resolve sharpened like steel. She began collecting every scrap of information Daniel uncovered, studying it with intensity. Bank transfers, fake signatures, business lies. Each document was another brick in the case she was quietly building. She might not have had the strength to stand tall physically, but her mind and spirit were stronger than ever. One evening, after a particularly brutal fever broke, Emily sat up, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes burning with clarity. "He tried to destroy me," she whispered to Lisa and Daniel. "But he doesn't understand. Pain doesn't break me, it fuels me. The weaker my body feels, the stronger my soul grows." Lisa gripped her hand, overcome with emotion. Daniel nodded solemnly, seeing the fire return to Emily's eyes. And in that fragile body, frail yet unyielding, Emily carried a power Michael could never crush. The power of a woman who had already walked through hell and was preparing to return with flames in her hands. The fever had left Emily weaker than ever, but her mind was clearer than it had been in years. She realized that no matter how careful her plan was, life was uncertain. Michael was still out there, unpredictable, dangerous, and capable of anything. If something happened to her, she couldn't allow her child to grow up without knowing the truth. So, one quiet night, she pulled her journal close and began writing letters. Not just to her unborn child, but to everyone who mattered. Her pen scratched slowly across the paper, her hand trembling, but her words steady and deliberate. To her baby she wrote, "You are the reason I fought, the reason I survived when I thought I couldn't. Even if I'm not there to hold you, know that my love will surround you for every day of your life. Never believe you are unwanted. You were the miracle that gave me courage." Tears blurred her vision, but she kept writing. To Lisa she wrote, "You were my sister in every way that mattered. You saw me when no one else did. If I don't make it, promise me you'll tell my child who I really was. Not just the broken woman Michael tried to create, but the fighter I became with your help." To Daniel, she wrote, "Thank you for giving me back my voice. You believed me when the world would have dismissed me. If justice comes, it will be because you stood beside me when I was too weak to stand alone." She sealed each letter carefully, labeling them with names, and placed them in a box Lisa had given her. She tied the box with string and whispered, "If I fall, these will rise in my place." Lisa found her hours later, still seated at the table, her head resting against her arm. "Emily, you need rest," Lisa urged gently. Emily smiled faintly. "I will. But first, I needed to leave something behind, something that tells the truth if I can't." Lisa's throat tightened as she glanced at the sealed envelopes. "You're not going anywhere, Em. You'll be here to tell your story yourself." Emily squeezed her friend's hand. "I hope so, but hope isn't enough. Preparation is survival." Later that night, Emily read one of her letters aloud to her unborn child, her voice soft but unwavering. "One day, we'll walk in the sunlight without fear. But if I'm not there, know that I fought for you with everything I had." The baby kicked gently, and Emily pressed her hand against her belly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Do you hear that? You're already strong." In the dim light, surrounded by her words, Emily felt a strange peace. She wasn't just running anymore. She was documenting her truth, preserving her voice so it could never again be silenced. And though her body was fragile, her words became immortal. Letters of love and defiance that would outlast Michael's cruelty and ensure her story would never die. The night of the charity gala was meant to be Michael Carter's triumph. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, his mistress Claire on his arm, he strutted into Houston's grand ballroom as though he owned the place. The chandeliers glimmered above him, cameras flashed, and guests whispered admiringly about his success. To Michael, this was his stage, his proof that he had risen above tragedy. His dead wife was nothing more than a shadow, and now he was free to bask in the spotlight. But fate had other plans. Lisa and Daniel had helped Emily prepare for this moment for months. She arrived quietly, escorted by Daniel, her transformation breathtaking. Gone was the fragile woman with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Emily now carried herself with dignity, her hair styled elegantly, her dress simple yet commanding. Her presence radiated strength, and for the first time in years, she looked like the woman she was always meant to be. Gasps filled the room the moment she stepped through the doors. Guests froze mid-conversation, their champagne glasses trembling. Whispers erupted. "Isn't that Emily Carter? But wasn't she dead?" Michael turned, laughter still on his lips, and the color drained from his face. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering across the marble floor. His eyes widened, disbelief and horror colliding as he stared at the wife he thought had vanished forever. Emily didn't flinch. She walked steadily toward him, her heels clicking like thunder in the silent hall. Her gaze was sharp, unwavering, cutting through him in a way no scream ever could. "Hello, Michael," she said softly, her voice steady but carrying across the room like a blade. Claire stiffened at his side, her arm slipping from his. Guests turned to watch, some covering their mouths in shock, others exchanging nervous glances. The once proud Michael Carter looked like a ghost standing before the woman he had buried in his mind. "You," Michael stammered, his voice trembling. "You're supposed to be gone?" Emily finished for him, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's what you wanted, wasn't it? For me to disappear so you could live your life without consequences?" His face flushed, sweat beading at his temples. This isn't possible. You're not." But Emily raised her hand, silencing him. Daniel stepped forward, holding a folder thick with documents. "It's very possible, Mr. Carter. While you paraded your mistress and wasted money, Emily gathered every piece of evidence of your lies. Financial fraud, infidelity, abuse." The room erupted with shocked murmurs. Claire stepped back, her face paling as she realized she had tethered herself to a sinking ship. Emily's eyes never left Michael's. "You thought you broke me, but all you did was free me. And now the world will see who you really are." Michael opened his mouth, desperate to regain control, but no words came. For the first time, he was powerless. Not because Emily screamed, but because she stood tall, unbroken, undeniable. And in that glittering ballroom, Michael Carter's empire began to crumble. Not with fists or storms, but with the return of the woman he believed he had destroyed. The gala that Michael Carter believed would crown his success, instead marked the beginning of his ruin. The moment Emily revealed herself, everything he had built on lies started to unravel. Guests who once shook his hand now stepped back, whispering in disgust. Business partners excused themselves from his side, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Even Claire slipped away quietly, leaving him stranded in the spotlight he had once craved. Daniel moved swiftly, distributing copies of documents to the press that had been invited to cover the event. Bank fraud, embezzlement, secret accounts, all traced back to Michael. Reporters snapped photos furiously, their cameras flashing like lightning, capturing every twitch of his face, every bead of sweat that rolled down his forehead. Michael tried to speak, to spin his version of events, but his words stumbled over themselves. This is a mistake. She's lying. She faked everything." But the evidence in Daniel's hands was irrefutable, and the crowd no longer believed his empty protests. Emily didn't shout. She didn't need to. She stood tall, her silence louder than any of Michael's frantic denials. Her very presence was proof that his cruelty could not erase her, that his power was an illusion. Within days, the fallout was devastating. The company he worked for suspended him pending investigation. His bank accounts were frozen. His so-called friends stopped answering his calls. And Claire, the mistress he thought would stay by his side, vanished without a trace, taking with her whatever scraps of money she could. The press devoured the story. Widow returns from the dead to expose husband. Headlines painted Michael as a monster who abused his wife, squandered money, and betrayed his community. Neighbors who once pitied him now spat his name in disgust. Michael retreated to his house, the same house where he had once lorded over Emily. Now it was silent, suffocating, filled only with the echoes of his past cruelty. At night, he wandered from room to room, clutching a bottle of whiskey, haunted by visions of Emily kneeling in the rain. He swore he could hear her voice in the wind, whispering the words he had once dismissed. "You don't matter to me." But the law didn't whisper, it roared. Authorities, armed with the evidence Daniel provided, arrived at his doorstep. The charges stacked against him were overwhelming: fraud, financial misconduct, and investigations into domestic abuse. Michael's arrogance finally shattered as he was led away in handcuffs, cameras flashing, neighbors watching. Through it all, Emily remained calm. She didn't celebrate loudly or gloat. She simply held Lisa's hand and placed the other gently on her belly, knowing her child would never grow up under Michael's shadow. Michael's name, once respected, became a curse. His career ended, his reputation destroyed, his wealth vanished. And when he sat alone in his prison cell, stripped of everything, the only thing left was regret. Because in trying to erase Emily, Michael had only managed to erase himself. And the ghost of the woman he thought he controlled would haunt him for the rest of his days. The storm had passed, both outside and within Emily Carter's life. Weeks after Michael's arrest, the weight that had pressed on her chest for years finally lifted. She no longer had to look over her shoulder, no longer had to silence her voice or hide her bruises. The cage was gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could simply breathe. Emily moved into a modest home arranged through Daniel's legal network. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was hers. The walls didn't echo with shouting. The windows didn't hold the shadows of fear. They welcomed sunlight, and Emily found herself opening them wide every morning, letting in the fresh air of freedom. Lisa remained by her side through everything, helping with doctor's appointments and filling the house with laughter that had been absent for far too long. "You're glowing, Em?" Lisa teased one afternoon as she unpacked baby clothes. "Not even pregnancy glow. This is freedom glow." Emily laughed, a sound she had nearly forgotten how to make. "Maybe both," she admitted, her hand resting on her growing belly. Daniel, too, stayed involved, ensuring Michael's crimes were fully prosecuted. "He won't touch you again," he promised firmly. "The law is on your side now, and the truth, you gave it power." Emily nodded with gratitude. She had once believed the truth was her weakness, a story that would make people pity her. But now she understood it was her greatest weapon. By speaking, by surviving, she had turned Michael's cruelty into his downfall. When her child was finally born, Emily wept tears of joy as she held the tiny life against her chest. All the nights of suffering, all the storms, all the fear, they had led to this moment. She whispered softly, "You are free. You will never know the darkness I endured. I promise you that." Lisa snapped a photo. Emily, tired but radiant, cradling her newborn with a strength that glowed brighter than any wound ever inflicted on her. It was a picture of rebirth, not just for Emily, but for the life she had brought into the world. As months passed, Emily shared her story publicly. She spoke at women's shelters, told her truth in interviews, and encouraged others trapped in silence to find their voices. "We are not weak," she said to one crowd of survivors, her voice strong and steady. "We are stronger than anyone who tries to break us. And when we rise not just for ourselves, but for every woman who has ever been silenced." Applause thundered, but Emily didn't seek glory. She sought healing, for herself, for her child, for others still fighting their storms. At night, when she rocked her baby to sleep, she often reflected on her journey. She didn't think of Michael with hate anymore. She thought of him with pity. He had lost everything because he never understood love, respect, or true strength. Emily had survived. She had transformed her pain into power, her silence into a voice, and her scars into a shield. Her message to the world was clear. Storms may break branches, but they also reveal the roots that cannot be destroyed. So that's how Emily's story comes to an end, my dear friends. You're still here, aren't you? If you made it all the way to this moment, it means something inside this story touched your heart in a very personal way. And I want to take a moment to sit with you in that feeling. Emily's journey reminds us of something the Stoics taught long ago. We can't always control what others do to us, but we can choose how we respond. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Emily was beaten down, humiliated, even erased in the eyes of the world, but her mind and spirit refused to break. That choice, to hold on to hope, to rise again, became her freedom. And isn't that something we can all carry into our own lives? Maybe you're not facing the same storm as Emily, but perhaps you know what it feels like to be underestimated, silenced, or taken for granted. Her story whispers to us, you are stronger than the voices that try to define you. You are more than the pain you've endured. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Emily turned her suffering into strength, her silence into a voice that inspired others. And if she could do that, so can you, in your own way. Whatever battle you're facing, remember, you are not alone, and your story can become a source of healing not just for you, but for others who need to hear it. If Emily's story moved you, let it be more than just a moment. Share it with someone who might need encouragement tonight. Tap the like button so more people can see it, and don't forget to subscribe, because here we tell stories that don't just entertain, but remind us what it means to endure, to rise, and to heal. So my friends, let's carry Emily's strength with us. The storm doesn't get the last word. You do.